buyer perspective, as well as advocates that support both farmers and farm workers in the Hudson Valley. Then we'll go into the table discussion after a short break where the panelists will also join the table discussion. And from there, we're going to report out, because we want to learn what you've discussed at your individual tables so that everybody can benefit from that. And then we'll finish the day off with sort of like another musical, sort of like musical song, the Homegrown Tomato song, to send us all on our way. But let's take a look at actually how we're going to approach this. What's our goal for today? Our goal was really about helping you first come understand what is the local ecosystem for producing food, for the food that ends up on our table. What actually is, who are the different stakeholders involved? We want you to gain an understanding of what resources are actually available for farmers and for farm workers in the Hudson Valley. That was one of the feedbacks that we had from our fall conference, that it was really something that people wanted to learn more about. And also then the most important part, and this takes us back to the panel and the brainstorming discussion, is to really think about, well, what are things that I can do on a regular basis to really help farmers and farm workers in the Hudson Valley. So what do we mean when we actually say farm workers and farmers in the Hudson Valley? What is actually this whole system that provides us with the food that we have, the food that we find in the supermarket, the food that you find in a restaurant, and that you kind of like bring to your home? What's important for us to understand as part of the discussion is that it's not just a farm, it's not just a supermarket, it's not just a farmer's market, but it's a whole chain. And if we want to effect change, we really need to think bigger. We need to think about the different portions that make up that whole food value chain. What really brings that food together? And when we think about change, change can happen at any one of these points within that cycle. But it also means if we change something on one end, we'll also trigger a change on the other end. There's always going to be a connected and interconnected relationship between all of that. And that's important to keep in mind when we think about how do we really help farmers and farm workers in the Hudson Valley. So we just wanted to sort of level set that. Now many of you might go like, well, that's great, but I don't really know what we mean by farming in the Hudson Valley. So what we did here is I pulled together a few facts, and it's a long list, so I'm actually going to give you a few minutes to just briefly read through that, and then we'll go into some highlights from that.
Maybe you could read them, because from in the back of the room it's a little tough.
I apologize. I'll be happy to do that. So when we talk about the Hudson Valley and agriculture in the Hudson Valley, we're looking at about 3,100 farms, 474,000 square feet, 474,000 acres of farmland, 322 million of food per year that is being produced in the Hudson Valley. However, only about 40% of the farms in the Hudson Valley are actually profitable. What do we produce in the Hudson Valley? It's quite a mix. It is fruit, it's vegetable. Dairy is the other select majority area for sales. And additional products are meat, poultry, and eggs. Those are really the main products that we find here. And when you kind of drive through the area, what you probably see most of it is the fruit and vegetable. You probably see less of the dairy and the other products. But they're here and they make up a significant portion of the farming in the Hudson Valley. We are impacted by climate change, and the weather events really make the output of what we can produce in the area, on one hand difficult, but also not predictable. And it's important to keep that in mind. We're not in the industrial stage of farming that you see in the Midwest, where you might see thousands of acres. Here we're talking 40 acres, if we're talking about a large farm. We're in a very different sort of scale. There's a robust demand for the products, which is great. One of the things that allows us to still have farms in the Hudson Valley is because we have New York City just 90 miles south of us, and it allows many sort of farmers to have that additional outlet and be able to also, with people coming up to places like the Mountain House, to be able to have exposure to the food, but also we're able to command higher prices, therefore helping the farms still to stay more profitable. There's a growing industry of local craft manufacturers where both farmers or sort of new people coming to the areas have expanded into providing cideries, distilleries, breweries, different craft foods that really help add to that ability for us to attract people to come here. And again, for farmers also to generate additional income of those additional industries. Most of the farms are small and mid-sized and really compete against some of like the other more low-cost industrial farms that we find outside of here. Because when you look at the supermarkets, most of the salad you find at supermarkets, for instance, comes from California. It's picked 2 weeks ago and it kind of makes its way across the country until it gets into the shelf. Vis-a-vis the farms here that have a limited growing season but still offer that same product. But we're still competing on it on price because we all have a certain level of price sensitivity about how much we want to pay. I think what we sometimes think is that there's such a huge portion of farmers markets and CSAs in the area. Isn't that where most of the farms actually generate their income? And the surprising number, to me certainly surprising number too, was it's actually only about 5% of the sales. It is a very small portion. So again, like when we think back about that picture of the whole food system, we really need to think about it in a much bigger portion because it's not just what you see right here that drives the success and the sustainability of local farms and allows farm workers to have the skilled jobs that they have here in the area. A couple highlights from that. You see here on the upper left, you can see how much the farmland in the farms have declined over the last 50 years. You can also see that the majority of sales for farms and farm products are still through supermarkets or other large outlets. So that's on the farm side. Now when we think about farm workers in the Hudson Valley, based on a study from a few years back, we know that about 20% of the farm workers are white or sort of like, you know, and the remainder is black or Hispanic. The countries of origin it's quite a diverse range of where our farm workers are coming from. The legal status, and I think that's part of the challenge that we're facing when we're talking about farm workers and helping farm workers in the Hudson Valley, is that we're dealing with a very large percentage of farm workers that are still undocumented. And through that, when we're trying to see kind of how do we help farms and farm workers in the Hudson Valley, it's hard to pinpoint where is the population. So much of the population is never talked about, never visible, because many of the workers also are seasonal workers that are only here for a few months of the year. And we don't actually see that part of what makes up farming. When we think about, it's like, well, you know, are most farm workers just migrating? And I think what you see here on the very right is many of the seasonal farm workers really today are here year-round. So we're also talking about, these are people that live among us. These are not people that are just somewhere hidden away. They're part of our community, and we want to sort of be able to help them. So how do we attack this very big problem there? You see a lot of very complex issues, a lot of also, not necessarily issues that we can solve in this room, like immigration or larger sort of policies like the Farm Bill. So not things that we can necessarily tackle right here in this room. So our ask really for the discussion today is to suspend the larger picture of policy and call it the macroeconomic environment that we can't really control right here and then. We want to focus on the right here in the Hudson Valley, the area that we can control. It's not about creating large monumental changes. It's about figuring out what are those little steps that each one of us can take to make a change for both farms and farm workers in the Hudson Valley. That's really what we're looking for. So what we're talking about is really, what we're focusing on is farmers, the relationship to food buyers, and the relationship between farmers and farm workers, how the advocates, both on the farmer and farm worker side, support farmers and farm workers in the Hudson Valley. And when we get to the table discussion, that's really where we kind of like turn the picture on ourselves as the consumers, as the buyers of that food. what's our role in that as well? So it is a bit of an experiment that we're going through today. It's a big topic, it has many different angles. We're not looking to limit it to one versus the other, but what our ask is to really focus in on the here and now, talk over what we as members of the community in the Hudson Valley can do to support our local farms and support the farm workers that are part of that. So we'll start off with the first part now. You're first going to learn a little bit more about what it really means to be a farmer, a farm worker, an advocate, or a food buyer in the Hudson Valley. And I'm going to ask Cara to come up here, who's going to be our moderator for the event. And then also ask our panelists to come up and join her. And thank you very much, and I look forward to a lively discussion.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody on this beautiful spring day. My name, as you heard, is Cara, and I'm a volunteer with Mohawk Consultations, and I'm very happy to be here to moderate this panel. I came to the conference that was held a few months ago on this topic, and it was a real eye-opener for me. I learned a lot about local agriculture and also about the migrant workers that are so critical to agriculture here. And what's great about today is that we have people here who have firsthand knowledge, they have deep knowledge and experience that they're going to share with us. And I'm really only going to pose 2 questions to them, but there are quite a few of them, so it's going to take us a little time to get through that. And you have in your packet a little introduction to each person, so I'm not going to spend time talking about them, but I'm going to invite them to share with you what their experience have been. So I think what we'll do is I'm going to start with Matt Igoe, and he is a board member with the Rondout Valley Growers Association. And what we'd like you to address, Matt, is to describe the Rondout Valley Growers Association and what it provides for the community. We're asking each speaker to speak for about 3 to 5 minutes. And just so you all know, Marty, who's sitting down here in the front row, is going to let you know when you're close to being done. When he shows you a picture of a rabbit, you're done. Okay, so that's how we're going to do it.
Can everyone hear me okay? All right. So the RVGA is the Rondout Valley Growers Association, and we've been around for about 13 years, and we're mainly concerned with the Rondout Valley, which is essentially where you are, just on the overside of this hill right here. We have farmers up and down there, been farming there since the 1600s. And to new farmers who have just started very recently. I'm here with a couple different hats on. I work for a farm, we have a farm, and I'm on the RVGA. So I'm just going to read from some notes here so we don't get confused. So on the RVGA, we mainly are concerned with, our primary mission is connecting the farmers with communities. If you're a farmer, you have a couple of resources. So you have a Cornell extension, which is generally the premier place to go for technical advice. You have Farm Bureau, which generally handles politics, things that happen in Albany, that kind of level. And the RVGA sees itself as the connection between the community and the farms. So farmers need communities, obviously, to support them while they're farming and to buy their goods, and communities need farms, local people, local farms, so they can have fresh, healthy, local food. So that's kind of the connection that the RVGA has. So we connect the communities to local farms, promote local food, that's a big part of it. We support local food pantries and with fresh, healthy local food, and we do education and outreach. And those programs are farm to community, so that's we have an e-newsletter that goes out to our community, social media, we have a food and farm finder map that comes out every year, and you're able to find all the farms up and down the Rondout Valley. Those are the tools we use to reach out to the community. The Farm to Food Pantry, we operate that in partnership with the Family of Woodstock, Ulster Corps, Ulster County Community Action, ARC of Ulster County and Greene Counties, and the Rondout Valley Central School District to deliver locally grown produce to communities in need. So essentially what happens is our farmers gather thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of extra food that they grow every year. And then every week it all gets picked up and it gets delivered to food pantries up and down the Rondout Valley and around the area. And we also have a farm to school program where some of our farmers will go into schools and talk about local farming, get kids interested in starting to grow. This is one of our new programs. We had a little bit of success with it a few years ago, and we're trying to push more in this direction. Really believe that the younger you get people involved and putting their hands in the dirt, farming, learning where the food comes from, the smarter food choices they'll make as they get older. And another big thing we're doing now is marketing. So if you don't have farms and farms aren't able to sell their goods, then the farmland is going to be up for grabs. So there's a lot of pressures on farmers in the Rondout Valley. There's climate change, there's development pressure, and there's the change in way people eat and drink and purchase their food and consume food and cook. And all of these things mean that the farmer has to be always thinking about how to find a market, a new market, open new markets. Farmers markets are on the decline a little bit, so how are we going to find places for people to sell their goods and keep the farms open? So one of the things the Rondout Valley Growers Association is doing is we're going to have a marketing program. It's going to enable people to interact more directly with their farms, find certain farm routes where they can come up and travel and go to buy directly from the farmers, as well as a B2B program that will help farmers connect directly with more of institutional buyers, restaurants, that type of thing. And like I said, primarily we're focused on the community, farmers to community. That's our main goal.
You didn't get the rally. Thanks very much. Next, we're going to hear from Kevin Terr, who is a co-owner of, is it Red Barn Produce. So he's interacting with the farmers and with the distributors.
My name is Kevin Terr. Together with my wife, Tamara, we own Red Barn Produce in Highland, New York. We're a certified New York State woman-owned business. We've been in business this is our 30th year. And we've been dealing with farms for a long time. We started as just basic produce distributors. We had a pickup truck. We used to go down to New York City and pick up our product. And then we'd sell it. We established a pretty quick relationship with the Culinary Institute of America. And at that particular time, after a few months we were with them, they had called us and said to us they had a farm and they really loved the tomatoes for the farm, but they couldn't get the farmer to distribute their tomatoes. The farmer didn't have the means to do it, so they asked if we might be able to help them out. And that basically was a springboard for us to get involved with a lot of the farms. From there, we began to find out that a lot of the farms had the same problems, distribution. A lot of them were at that particular time, back in the early 90s, they were complaining that a lot of the times they'd bring their produce down to New York City to commission merchants and they wouldn't get paid, or they'd get paid 30 days late, or they'd get whatever they sold, they'd be cut in half, told that the quality was poor. So we began to contact some of these farms and explain to them that we would like to become a hub. And we would buy their produce from them, and we would pay them in a timely manner. We discussed the matter, 14 days, 30 days, they get their money. We would take their produce in and sell it, but we would sell their produce to area restaurants and institutions, schools, and we would put their name on the invoice. So that was local for us. It wasn't variable, it wasn't relative. Local produce meant it came from, let's say, 2 cases of organic tomatoes from Teleferro's farm in Ulster County, New York. And from there, we had a lot of farmers that were contacting us. We realized there was a definite niche for us there to help these farmers out. It would help us out, it would help the farmers out. So today, what we try to do is we try to be a hub for these farms. Last year, we dealt with 27 different farms. This year already, we have 5 new farms that called us in the last 4 or 5 weeks. So we're hoping to deal with over 30 farms this week. We started with 2 people, my wife and myself. We have, now we employ 40. And that's basically what we do. We donate a lot to the community. We donate to churches. We're always open for sponsorships for teams and schools. Try to give back as much as we can. right now we have a rehab center that's located 2 or 3 miles from us that doesn't have any financing at all, so they come 3 or 4 times a week. If we have something that's outdated and still good, or if we have an extra case of eggs, we give them, and we try to help out there. We also have branched into other New York State products. As long as they're New York State products and they meet the specifications, which are usually a USDA audit showing that they're safety inspected. We distribute 3 different kinds of local eggs. We distribute local dairy. We distribute local maple syrup for a company in Sullivan County. We're a honey distributor, and we distribute for Wild Hive, which is organic flour, grains, dried beans that are processed grown, and well, they're made in the Hudson Valley. So we're always looking for new distributors in the area that have a viable product. One thing I will say is we started with restaurants, and we quickly moved out of that field, and now we deal with the majority of our customers are schools, which we found early on were buying produce from California, apples from California, when we're right in the middle of best apple growing areas in the world as far as I'm concerned. So now 95% of the apples that we sell are New York State apples. And we supply 14 different schools or systems with those apples today. And that's red.
Great. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to hear from a farm worker. Efrain Zavala has been in the United States for many years and in the Hudson Valley for, I think, 14 years, and with the Bradley Farm for 12. So Efrain, we'd be interested in hearing you describe your work and tell us about the different farms you've worked on.
Yes, I used to work on the farmers since 1996. I used to work in New Jersey, like 1 hour apart from here. I was working in that for 14 years, growing tomatoes, peach trees, pruning, on a farm, and this farm closed in 1999. So I went back to my, to Mexico, and I wasn't there for 2 years. And I come back, and because I always like to work in the farm. So I've been working in here in Newport for 14 years. And I love to work in the farm.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from a person who provides services for farm workers. And we're going to hear from Maryellen, Whittington-Couse, who is the director of the Mid-Hudson Migrant Education Program at SUNY New Paltz. And what we would like you to respond to is just for you to describe your work and the services you provide.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to say my name once just because everybody seems to get it wrong, and it's Maryellen Whittington-Couse. Sorry, it's fine. I teach English as a second language to many people. So. I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about an often invisible population.
Can't hear you.
Just pull closer.
I was saying that I wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about an often invisible population, and that is actually the children of migrant farm workers, as well as the youth who do farm work in the United States, and specifically in the Hudson Valley. The Migrant Ed program was established by the federal government in 1966. The funding is granted through the United States Department of Education and administered by the New York State Education Department. And it's provided to minimize the disruption caused by migrant children's frequent moves, and in recognition of the correlation between that mobility and low graduation rates. And so the Mid-Hudson Migrant Ed program is funded to provide supplemental educational programs, educational advocacy, and support services based on students and their families' needs. And we provide here in the Hudson Valley to between 700 and 800 youth a year. The services are provided by our team of 20+ migrant educators educators who specialize in early childhood and adolescent education, as well as parent involvement and out-of-school youth services. And I just want to put a plug out because we have some with us today. They provide great service. The majority of migrant families we serve are from Mexico or Central American countries. That changes over time, and so that's who we serve right now. And so over half of the students that we serve have moved in the last 12 months. Many are English language learners who speak Spanish as a first language and read below grade level. Regardless of their specific location, migrant families are often socially isolated in our communities. Many families do not have their own transportation and live in areas not served by public transportation. Their long work hours and work week also make participation in our schools and community activities challenging. Frequently, our migrant youth and their families don't associate with non-migrant families. So to overcome that isolation, our migrant educators discuss transportation options with them. We support their carpooling. We help them figure things out so that they can advocate for themselves. And for our programming, we often provide transportation. Because of the nature of our program, the summer is a critical time of service. During the summer, our team focuses on preventing what is known as summer loss, where middle-class kids are doing great fun, enriching things during the summer. We provide that for them. And so it may be family literacy activities, in-home instruction, field trips, and often migrant summer schools. Our in-school adolescents are recruited and support to participate in statewide migrant residential summer programs. Summer is also when our region sees an increase in out-of-school youth. When they are available, these students and youth are provided ESL and life skills instruction. But they are really busy working, and so that is often challenging for us. Our program collaborates with other local agencies to bring important health services to and preventative information to family as well. And one of the really important things we do for youth and children is that at the end of the summer, we provide all of our in-school children with school supplies, which with decreasing state budgets and education funding, because actually of a decrease in migrant student numbers as well, we are seeking more and more to get those school supplies through donations. And so finally, I just want to say that there are a number of other ways we support families in our community. We ensure that they are registered in school as soon as possible. That is one of the most important things that we do, is try to minimize that educational disruption that they experience because of inability. We ensure immediate access to free and reduced lunch. All of our children are categorically eligible for free and reduced lunch. Almost all live in poverty. We facilitate medical appointments specifically as it relates to school immunizations. They can't go to school for long without them. We facilitate medical appointments. We connect to community educational and recreational opportunities, such as libraries, adult ed for their parents, soccer teams, and summer sports and activities. We translate school-related, medical, and community-related materials and advocate whenever possible to have the local agencies and school districts to provide that for them. We connect to community resources that help with legal issues or domestic issues. We help them get library cards. For many families, we're helping connect to a church that uses a language that they understand. We get them access to community recreational activities. So we're really committed to working in partnership with parents and supporting them in their understanding and to increase their influence on their children's education. And we're also able to provide effective services to families by building partnerships with all of you, with schools and community organizations.
Great, thank you. Cara, Kinney, we're going to turn to you. Cara is a farmer on Springtown Road, and if you would please describe your farm and what you produce and how you market what you produce, that would be great.
Okay. it does feel a little funny to follow all that she does because I'm like, I grow vegetables. It's a very limited thing. But I have, well, I own 2 parcels on Springtown Road. One I share with a fellow farmer, Hector Tejada from Canuco Farm. So growing-wise, we have about 35 acres that we can use in a given season. And most of what I sell, I go to Brooklyn to a market there. Hector has a market in Brooklyn, and then on the farm, there's a CSA during the season. The markets we do year-round in the city. So, what else do you want to know?
Well, how many people work with you?
Okay. So during the farm season, there are 5 people that come in through the foreign worker visa program. I, finagle my way through all of that paperwork and bring men here who I've worked with for a number of years. I mean, I think the longest PDO and I have worked together, I think this is going to be year 15. So there's the 5 people, and then locally there's a woman and her son who come part-time, and like they'll help me with the CSA or like watering greenhouses or washing all the harvest buckets so that we don't have to be tied up doing that stuff. And then on the farm there's a certified kitchen, and there's a local woman who comes and works processing, like I'll make recipes of things that we can make value added from the farm. And then she will willingly stay indoors all day and make things. So I can make up a recipe and just pass it off to her, and I can go back outside and work. So I think that's kind of what we do.
Great. I know how hard you work because I've been to visit. Thanks a lot. So Araceli Rodriguez, who's sitting next to Cara, if you could also describe to us your farming experience, where you've worked, and what you're doing.
I come in here in 2002 for my husband, my 2 daughters, and my husband and I working in the farm, and I work together, and it's very nice when there's putting the vegetables a little and grow up, and when it's ready to pick the vegetables, oh, she says it's happy. She said I have all the time work for making vegetables fresh, all the kinds, tomatoes, whatever, plenty. But I like to work in the farm, make it happy, and when I go to the farmer's market, sell my products. The people, they say, oh, very nice products, organic. Then I'm happy to work in the farm.
Araceli both works on a farm, and she and her husband farm land on their own and go to market for themselves, right? That's,
Yeah.
And where is your farm?
In New Paltz.
In New Paltz.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
You are.
Finally, we're going to hear from Richard Witt, who's the Executive Director of the Rural Migrant Ministry. And we'd be interested in hearing about the services you provide and your thoughts.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Perhaps the best way to capture what we do is to create a picture for you. Imagine standing on the side of a field, and someone you know, somebody well known by many in the community, appears with a serious leg injury. And then imagine looking over to the far end of the field and seeing 3 people also with serious leg injuries. And you're sitting there trying to figure out what to do. And as you're sitting there trying to figure out what to do, you hear people around you saying that they know the person right near you, that we need to do something. And you hear other voices saying, oh, we don't know those people over on the other end. And you hear another voice saying, well, they shouldn't even be there in that field. And then you hear people saying, well, I don't even think I don't know how to communicate with them. They don't even speak the language that I speak. So let's take care of the person right here. you're faced with, at first glance, what to do about somebody that's hurting. You're also faced, if you pause for a moment and thought about it, with the question of what caused the injury to begin with. Rural Migrant Ministry was created to serve those people at the other end of the field that are hurting, that are excluded, that perhaps maybe don't feel welcome, that are struggling to get by, and to figure out also with them what caused the injury, what's causing the injury. What are the factors in our community ranging from language difference, poverty, racism, lack of transportation, lack of services for they and their children, the inability to create opportunity. Rural Migrant Ministry was created to deal with the systemic issues because it's very easy to get caught up in the personal issues, the individual issues. How much more challenging it is to face the systemic issues of why farm workers in our community and farm workers across the land are still the ones who are brown, are the ones who are poor, are the ones that have no voice in the political realms where decisions are being made impacting their lives. We do that by standing with workers to change those laws that are affecting them. We do that by standing with workers so that their voices can be heard within our communities, so that they feel welcomed and included. We do that by being provocative, by raising questions about who's making decisions about our local transportation system, who's making decisions in our school systems, who's making decisions about our health care, and who's missing from those tables when those decisions are being made. And I'll stop by saying, or pointing out, that you'll notice I didn't say anything about not helping the person closest to us who's injured. The challenge is to help all and to find the way to fix a system that is harming everybody involved in the system. But unfortunately, it's much easier to focus on those that we know and work with and whose voices we hear on a regular basis than it is to stand with those who are so distant from us.
Thank you. That's a great segue. You can all take a deep breath because now we'll go into our second question, which I think is very much related to what Richard just articulated. We know there are big systemic issues to address, but we also know that there are things we can do within our community and kind of person to person to make life better for both farmers and farm workers. And what we'd like you all to think about and respond to is what is your vision for the future, and what changes do you think are most needed, and what steps do you think are needed to get to those changes? And we're going to go in the same order we went in before, and we'll start with Matt.
Thanks a lot. So, like I said, I wear a couple hats. So I think I'll start with the local one, and then maybe move on to the next one. So the RVGA is concerned about the farms and the farmers who have been farming here for a long time or short time. We're a member organization, and we know acutely that if we don't find ways to market what we produce, we're going to lose out. And what's going to happen is if we can't sell what we produce, then the food system that is already dominated by very large corporations is going to be further dominated by those corporations because there'll be less choice in the small and mid-farm level. So most immediately, what our goal is to find places for our farmers, routes for our farmers to make the money they need to stay in business, to keep their farms, family farms or new farms, whatever it's going to be, grow their business, and for everyone there to prosper. Now, we don't live in a vacuum. So we're not in this, Hudson Valley is a wonderful place, and we have a lot to support, and we're very deeply appreciative for it. But we don't live in a vacuum. There's market forces outside of this. And the food system that we work in, that we work against really most of the time, it has been around for a very long time. And I know that we're talking about local solutions here, but unfortunately we live in a global world, in a global market. And the systems that were put into place 1938, excluding farm workers from certain protections, formed a food system that we all live with today as farmers, as farm workers, and everything else. And if we're going to figure out ways to survive locally, I think we also have to acknowledge that we made a big mistake in 1938. That was a racially motivated bill that was passed, and to appease southern states, and our people were left out of it, and notably farm workers. So this food system that we've grown up around is built upon that law, and how we pay people and how we charge for food, what we're willing to pay for food. And it's been a real boon that people started paying attention to local farms in the past 30, 40 years. And in those past 30, 40 years, we've really been able to build up a huge industry locally. It's been, it's nationally known to be the craft food hub, in the Hudson Valley, and it's something we'd like to maintain. But if we're going to do that, we have to address the systemic problems that you were talking about here, and local problems like how much are you willing to pay for something? If we're going to pay people more money, are you going to pay more for eggs? Are you going to pay more for milk? Are you going to pay more for tomatoes? If we're going to supply health care for everybody, are you going to pay more for your craft cheese and your craft beer and your craft apples? So those are the big problems, and I can more or less assure you that every farmer out there wants what's best for themselves, for their family, for the farms, for the food system, for their workers, and any solutions we can come to together are welcome.
Great, thank you. Kevin, let's move to you.
In the last maybe 8 to 10 years, we started to really sell to, we see the powers that be are really the corporates out there. There's a lot of big corporates that are running the kitchens in a lot of the second to big schools that buy from us. And we see a lot of blocking techniques put up when we want to sell local farm products to these particular kitchens. And what we found was that the safety inspection tests that a lot of these farms have to go through and pass take a toll on the farmer. We found that there's been a lot of complaints from the farmers, and it's difficult to come up with the money to pass these tests, put in the sanitary systems that are needed. I think that if the tests were made, if the audits and the USC inspections were made easier for the farmers, it would really help a lot, because we do find that a lot of corporates will block what we want to sell. They'll say, are these farms inspected? And a lot of small farms are not inspected. I think that's a definite problem out there. I think that the USDA puts a lot more pressure on a farm getting inspected than it does for distributors like us, which are classified as warehouse inspections. I think that if they made it easier for these people to get inspections, they could sell more produce. Another thing that we've found is that we encourage all the farms that we deal with to sell their products for as much as they can get. We're wholesalers, So if you're selling your product in New York City for $1.50 a pound, we can't pay that. So we're not looking to take your produce at a discount like that. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to tell the farms that we deal with today, use the market, sell what you can sell at the most money you can possibly make, and then whatever you don't sell or have left over, then come to us and we'll buy it at a wholesale level. And that's been very successful in the last 2 years with farms. We'll get a call up, hey, listen, you know, we got 100 pounds of this left over, and we'll ask them what they're selling it for, but we don't say, hey, we'll only give you this much. We say, try to sell it. When you can't sell it before it goes bad, sell it to us, regardless of what it is. And I think that's helped a lot of farms that we deal with. It gives them a light at the end of the tunnel, and they know that they can go to the remarket and sell something for $2 a pound. And if it doesn't happen, they can call us on Monday or Tuesday, and we'll take it off their hands. And whatever the prices we agree on, I get 75 cents a pound, but it won't go to waste. And I think that's something that's really helped us and helped a lot of the farms.
Thanks, Kevin. Efrain, are you ready to offer your thoughts?
Well, I have one of my sons, he worked with me in the field. So this is the third year, and I try to teach him how to grow everything the vegetable. And he likes to work at that.
So your vision revolves around your family and...
Yeah, I have my family. I bring them like 3 years ago. My son is 22 years old. So he has 3 years with me working in the field. And I try to teach him how to start in the greenhouse, from there to the field, and we'll be okay.
So you're passing your knowledge on to him.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Maryellen?
So, in terms of the changes that we would like to see, one of the things that we would like to see is a recognition for the linguistic diversity of the population, the farm worker population and their families. So within schools, communities, and service agencies, we'd like to see more information provided in a language they understand. Our families have, many of them have experienced different levels of trauma, and so one of the things we really want to see in the Hudson Valley are more therapists and mental health providers that are experienced in trauma and that are also bilingual. Another issue that we see, and I think that many people experience in the Hudson Valley, is that there is not enough affordable housing available. 10% of our current migrant youth population live with families that are considered homeless. And what that means is that due to economic hardship, they're doubled up. They're living with either friends or relatives, but not because they want to be, and in very tight and often substandard housing situations. And finally, another thing that we think on a systemic level that's really important is that we really need to look at public transportation in the Hudson Valley and what we can do to make public transportation more accessible. For our youth that we really support and promote higher education to, that they are happy to go to local community colleges. They can't always get there. In fact, they often can't get there. And so this is another thing that's really important. And really what we want our youth to meet their potential. So what we can do together in partnership so that young people have access to everything that's possible for them. That's what we want.
Great, thank you. Let's see, Cara.
I guess, kind of right now, I mean, I guess this is sort of riding off of some of what Matt was talking about, because what he's hitting on is the Fair Labor Practices Act in his conversation there. And so each year in New York, you'll get a lot of news stories, op-ed pieces talking about farm workers and deplorable conditions or wage theft, or plenty of these ideas that somehow just resonate and stick with people. And then there's this other thing that happens in media where it's like farmers themselves are these like unsung heroes doing this incredible thing, and I have a lot of trouble tying those two things together, because like the exploited farm workers isn't a world that I see or live in, and I interact an awful lot with farm workers. And like the unsung hero aspect of farms, I mean, a lot of us just love what we do and just want to do this work, and you know, it's a pretty simplistic mindset. I'm afraid to tell that to you, but it's true. But you know, so like, if those are the same people as heroes, and the farm workers are going through this other story, they don't match. So somewhere in there, there's a truth that hasn't yet been figured out or spoken about. And I find this struggle where when those stories are coming up in the media, like I work in the marketplace, you know, direct with consumers, so they'll ask me about it, and they say, but not you, Cara. And I'm like, well then who? Like if you don't think that I'm doing this to farm workers, who's doing this to farm workers? And it's Big Ag is the answer. And I'm like, well, who's Big Ag? So we're kind of really stuck because there's not, you know, it's like this boogeyman kind of thing, and I'm just like, I'm sure there's a percent of terrible things happening. I mean, there's a percent of terrible things happening no matter what the work is. It seems to me like there's always something bad happening, but I think the percent of that isn't what seems to be a story that people are willing to accept are the conditions of farm workers. And then there's the weirdness that we don't really know what or who those farmers are that are potentially doing that exploitation, because any of you who knows a farmer don't think that's what they're doing. So I'm kind of really stuck in this, like, you know, elastic zone of like, whoa, what is happening out here? So what that means for the future, I don't know, but somewhere in here I think there's a truth that hasn't been uncovered, and that's what I kind of prefer to see.
So you're kind of asking for a new narrative that helps bridge those disparate views.
Yeah, very good. Okay. She's good.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Araceli, would you like to speak about what you think would benefit you in terms of change, and what your vision is for a positive future?
I'm coming here for different, you see, opportunity for in my life and for my daughters too. I need to my daughters different opportunities. It's for him.
Yeah, I think Maryellen spoke to a lot of things that would facilitate opportunities for young people that need to happen in terms of transportation and opportunities for different educational and recreational experiences.
Yeah, my kids is I have three daughters. One is 24, and the other one is 22, and the third is 12. The two old ones, one is finishing the college, and the other one is maybe 2 more years to finish for the college, and the other one is still running.
And do you think they will want to be farmers?
Yeah, the little one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the cows. I like the horses. A lot of things. The chickens. I buy all the little baby chicks all the time. I like all kind of animals.
Thank you. Richard.
I'm going to agree with Matt. You know, I think our starting point in our conversations needs to be that we acknowledge that our system isn't working. And if we have that in our mind, then we can focus on how do we go about trying to change our system or fix our system, as opposed to how do we go about just trying to modify things. I think there needs to be systemic change. And I think one of the things that needs to happen as a part of that is we need to work to have farm worker voices heard. Because there are farm workers across New York State that are suffering, and I can understand that you might not hear those voices or that that's not your experience. We witnessed last January farm workers from across New York State testify before a public human rights hearing in Albany, and those testimonies have been published. And those testimonies are filled with stories of sexual abuse and wage theft and all sorts of other things that we don't like to hear about, but are realities. And I often equate this to, we have laws against drunk driving, not because everybody drives drunk, but because some people are driving drunk, and we need to protect them. Well, there is abuse going on in our system. And it gets back to what I said earlier about looking at systemically above and beyond looking at it personally. So I think working to get voices heard in the decision-making realms of our community. So as we look at our town boards and our school boards and what have you, who's missing from the table? And how do we get them to the table? And that's not easy. So a commitment to being persistent about getting those voices to the table. The other thing I would hold up is, how can we work to create a welcoming atmosphere in our community? You come to our community. New Paltz is the hub of our area, right? How many signs do we see in Spanish in our community? How many Mexican flags or Guatemalan flags, Salvadoran flags do we see in our community? What are we doing to create an atmosphere? There are a number of communities in New York State that every year have a Bienvenida, or we're really thankful for the farm workers in our community. We want you to know that we're thankful for you. There are simple steps that can be taken that get toward that long journey. That old adage that a long journey begins with the first steps. There are steps that we can do to create a different atmosphere here. The final thing I would say is that, there are folks, Roxbury Farms, an example not far from here, in which they are determined to pay more to the workers and give their workers some rights in collaboration with their customers, agreeing to pay more in order to facilitate that. So again, those discussions or collaborations in which everybody's at the table saying, how can we make this work for you and for you and for you? And frankly, a lot of this gets back to us as consumers, and as has been mentioned several times, our reluctance to make more than a pittance for our food. Far different than other countries. Ultimately, the farm workers, and back to this Farm Worker Fair Labor Practices Bill, the farm workers in New York are saying these nasty situations or these unfortunate situations may not be happening, on this farm or in that farm, but our law in New York State says we are being treated differently under the law than others. That does not seem right. That does not seem fair. We want to be treated equally. We want our dignity. And in turn, we want to work to make the system work for all of us.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, you've all heard each other, and I always like to offer a panel the opportunity to say something about something they've heard if they would like. Is there anyone who would like to add something? No?
I would just say that because we work with so many children and their parents, and we provide a lot of our service in homes, that I want to honor and appreciate farm growers who provide fairness and equity in the workplace and build a relationship with their farm workers. And I know that what Cara speaks to is true because some of her farm workers' children are beneficiaries of our program, so we have access to that reality and we can confirm it. And we also believe there are multiple truths and multiple perspectives out there, and that many of our families are working in situations that are pretty horrible. So I just want to hold out that there are multiple truths and multiple perspectives, and it doesn't negate either.
That's a really excellent point. Well,
Can I just add?
yes, absolutely.
I really have long been intrigued by the points that you raised and others have raised about, I would love to get beyond the issues of inequality and be able to have our organization work with other organizations and businesses to think through how can we change. You know, one of our youth leadership programs is actually officially a part of the New York State United Teachers Union. Would love to use our relationship with the Teachers Union to figure out how we can use our voice and our power to get school districts to change their ways, joining with others to do that. So I think that, you know, the possibility of collaboration is great. It's just often hard to collaborate when you're not treated the same as others.
Thanks. Anyone else? A final word? All right. Well, I think we all want to thank you for giving us your insights and helping us bridge between the systemic and the global and what happens locally and what we can do locally. And so before we move into the next section, let's say thank you. So what we're going to do now is, this is your opportunity to reflect and talk about what you've heard. And we're going to have you break into discussion groups at your tables. Maybe some of the tables can come together so we have full tables. We want you to think about what you heard that really resonates with you and why, and if it suggests to you possible steps that could be taken here in our region to start to address some of the issues we heard about and some of the opportunities. And also to think about, well, what are the challenges or the obstacles to doing that? And how, as a community, can we work to overcome those obstacles? And I think we've heard a lot of seeds of ideas that will, hopefully, you'll be able to discuss. So what we're going to do is we're going to take about a 10-minute break, Evelyn, is that about right? About a 10-minute break? Give yourselves a chance to stretch a little bit and then come back to your tables. We'll have a panelist at each table, so you'll be able to have more opportunity to talk with the panelists. And we will have a record keeper at the table, a reporter, and that record keeper and reporter will report out to the group at the end. So think about whether you'd like to play that role. It's a really important role.
Okay.
There really aren't rules here. We really want people to be free to talk about what they want to talk about, and so I would say the only rule I can suggest is step up with your ideas and also step back so that everyone is heard. And I hope we all have fruitful conversations. And then we'll get back together, all together, for a final conversation. So thank you very much again to the panel. Stretch, take a little walk around, have a cup of tea or whatever, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes.
Oh,
What's the answer? What's the, are we getting people or are we giving people?
There's a whole table up in the front.
That's what, empty?
Well, sorry.
I know.
Está muy en el sur, ¿no? Sí. Yo fui aquí por camioneta de Texas a Costa Rica. Guanajuato tiene mucha montaña, ¿no? Y entonces no hay. Pero la carretera allá es por la carretera. Al oeste.
Yeah, exactly where it was.
4 horas manejando de más o menos al lado pacífico de México. Muchos años trabajando. Oigo que trabajaba aquí mientras su hijo ya creció. Entonces, no lo conoce hasta que...
I was glad to see it was an accident.
I just got to turn.